Title: The Flicker. Jamie had always been captivated by movies. Her bedroom was filled with posters of iconic film characters, monsters, heroes, and anti-heroes alike. To her, these figures weren't just figments of imagination. They were friends, mentors, or sometimes even enemies. But as the line between fiction and reality began to blur, Jamie's admiration for them would soon turn into a fight for her life. It all started one rainy afternoon in October when Jamie decided to binge-watch classic horror films that had been gathering dust on her shelf. She gathered a bowl of popcorn, settled into her favorite oversized beanbag chair, and pressed play on the remote. The flickering screen illuminated her room, casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls. As the first movie, Nightmare on Elm Street *, began, a strange static crackled through the screen. Jamie glanced at her phone. There were no signal issues. Shrugging it off, she dropped deeper into the story, captivated by Freddy Krueger's menacing antics. But as the film reached its climax, something felt off. With a burst of static, the screen flickered violently, then went black. "Great, just my luck," Jamie said, irritated. She attempted to fix it, banging on the side of the TV, but her efforts were futile. Suddenly, the room fell silent, and an intense chill swept through the air. She pulled her blanket closer, shivering, but her curiosity wouldn't let her turn away. Just then, the screen flickered back to life. A distorted version of Freddy's face, grotesquely grinning, stared directly at her. "Help us," he rasped in a voice that twisted her stomach into knots. The power surged back, and the film resumed, but now Freddy wasn't just in the screen. He was in the room with Jamie, his clawed gloves scraping against the walls. The sensation of dread mounted as she realized this wasn't possible. She blinked and shook her head, convincing herself it was nothing but her imagination. Little did she know, the flicker of the screen was just the beginning. As the night progressed, one character after another slipped through the veil of fiction, flooding the confines of her room. Pennywise from It gleefully danced in the corner, whispering sweet temptations. Jason Voorhees quite literally loomed over her from the doorway, his machete catching the faint light as he adjusted his menacing grip. Every time she turned away from one threat, another leered at her from the shadows. She was engulfed in a world of paranoia, her heart pounding as the characters circled closer, their intentions cryptic yet ominous. The room, adorned with once welcoming memorabilia, now resembled a twisted museum of horrors. Desperate, Jamie tried to recall the tales that had once thrilled her. "They're just movies," she muttered, swallowing back the rising bile, hoping to convince herself of the separation. "They can't hurt me." Quote, but reality had shifted, and the characters were far from benign now. Freddy approached first, his voice dripping with menace as he taunted her about her fears, layers of darkness unveiling her insecurities. Behind him, Jason took a slow, deliberate step forward, inching closer. "Let's play a game," Pennywise chimed in gleefully. "A game where the stakes are life or death." With her heart racing, Jamie realized she had to fight back. "No," she shouted defiantly, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. "You are not real. You are just made-up figments of fear." Jamie racked her brain for a way to combat them, remembering how in movies characters often had a weakness. Each entity before her was born from a story. Perhaps if she spoke the endings of their tales, she could banish them back into their worlds. "Freddy, you can't kill me. I'm awake," she yelled, her voice steady. The character froze, his grin faltering. "Jason, you're just a tragic figure fueled by vengeance," she pressed on, taking a step toward him. "You can't hurt me because I'm not in your world." Quote, finally, ignoring the growing disdain in Pennywise's eyes, she shouted the words that resonated with him. "You feed off fear. I refuse to be scared of you." Jamie felt the air shift, an energy transforming as she embraced her bravery. With each declaration, the characters writhed in protest, their forms flickering, pulling away from her. The room began to lighten. Shadows retreated back into the corners as they dwindled in size. In one final push, she shouted, "You will all go back to where you belong." As the echoes of her voice faded, the characters screamed, horrified, enraged, and then, after a flash of vibrant color, they disappeared with a sharp crackle like an ending film reel. Breathing heavily, Jamie felt the weight of fear lift from her shoulders. In an instant, her tranquil room returned to normalcy, the flickering screen now showing an empty static, as if sighing in relief with her. Jamie collapsed on the floor, adrenaline still surging through her veins, realizing she'd conquered the nightmare. Though the heroes and monsters weren't real, her newfound courage, ever present and undeniable, now flickered brightly within her. As a slight smile crept onto her lips, she promised herself she'd never let fear dictate her story again.